Why so serious?
Hans Zimmer is definitely amongst the most famous and most popular film composers working today. However, his style of music is wildly different from the styles of composers of the last century. I'm thinking John Williams or Danny Elfman or Jerry Goldsmith. It's not hard to work out why Zimmer and more modern film composers write so differently. I think of these earlier composers as more traditional composers. They had to write with pen and paper, scoring to precise cue sheets, and they're influenced by the great composers of classical music such as Strauss, Mahler, and Wagner. On the other hand, I think of more modern film composers, including Zimmer, as music producers, in some ways related to traditional composers, but in other ways related to producers of electronic dance music. More and more as technology progresses, film composers need to use more advanced technology to produce music, even if it's orchestral music. Just as digital film editing can now be done fairly effortlessly, a composer needs to be able to alter their music at a moment's notice to fit re-edited scenes. Also, they generally need to produce convincing, realistic mock-ups of their scores before they'll be allowed anywhere near a real orchestra. And this reliance on computers and virtual instruments significantly changes the process of composition, and also the kind of music that's being written. For example, there's less focus on traditional methods and orchestrations, and more focus on sound and good sound design. And so, good sound design becomes equal to, if not more important, than the traditional values of music composition. This is not to say that modern film composers are better or worse than the old ones, but with new technology comes a very different kind of music. Looking at Hans Zimmer, he sometimes comes out with brilliant themes full of character. But with the turn of the century, focus has shifted towards music production and the creation of sound worlds. And this is where Zimmer excels. What do I mean by sound worlds? I think Zimmer's talent lies in finding or creating a certain set of sound colours or sonic ideas which complement and enhance the film, which work perfectly with the mood, the visuals, and underlying story to create a cohesive and powerful work of art. And you'll find that just about every one of his most successful film scores has a unique and memorable sound world or sonic idea, a distinctive sound palette which belongs especially to that film and has contributed to the film's success. So in this video, I'm going to look at a selection of Hans Zimmer's best film scores from the 21st century and look at how Hans creates these sound worlds and why they work so well with the film. This Roman epic has a few interesting decisions concerning sound colours. Zimmer favours acoustic, plucked or blown instruments to create a faux authentic sense of using traditional, period instruments. Of course, the Romans had their own harps and wind instruments which far outdate the modern violin or trumpet, so in some sense it creates an atmosphere of being steeped in the ancient world. He also mimics various ethnic styles. When we're in Morocco, we get this kind of music with its ethnic percussion and use of the duduk. When we cut to Rome, suddenly the music becomes Wagnerian and Germanic to convey the structured orderliness of Rome in contrast to the rest of the world.
You do have a name. My name is Gladiator.
But the most significant contribution to the sound world of Gladiator is surely the voice of Lisa Gerrard. To me, Lisa's voice represents the most emotionally relevant and human element of the story, the idea of home and of Maximus's deep desire to return home. It represents the call of the earth, the call of the eternal feminine, a sense of peace. And you'll notice that this voice emerges whenever the theme of home is suggested in the film. In this score, Hans found the absolute minimal needed to convey the bad guy, the Joker. The Joker's leitmotif is essentially a string, almost a wire, being played higher and higher. It's actually two dissonant notes playing together, but the sound it creates is like a wire being pulled tighter and tighter, being pulled so tight it's going to snap at any moment, a sonic representation of being on the brink of total insanity. The sound itself is sheer tension, and so it works so well here when representing the Joker's anarchy. There's also this idea of infinite tension. The tension never resolves. We're always on the brink of having this wire snap, but it never quite does. And this is used most brilliantly when you don't see the Joker, but only hear this one sound. Then you know that something bad is coming. One of the great moments of this film is the climb out of prison, which becomes a significant story point for several characters. The climb is accompanied by this chant. Notice this rhythm. This rhythm is also constantly associated with Bane. You can hear it thumping away in the first sequence of the film, before we even know what those rhythms mean.
It doesn't matter who we are. What matters is our plan.
Now for something completely different. Sherlock has always been a violin player, though typically he'd play Bach partitas and high classical music. Hans Zimmer wanted to turn this on its head, and so he makes him a gypsy fiddle player. In fact, because of this decision, the whole score is infused with gypsy influence. The first film makes massive use of the cymbalum, an Eastern European instrument, to create its sound world. But the second film takes things a massive leap further. Zimmer and his team actually travelled to Slovakia and toured Roma camps to meet with gypsy musicians. Much of the score is thus recorded with these musicians interpreting the theme, and this creates a great sound world where cheap instruments are played with maximum expression and energy, and a lot of improvisation in a gypsy style. If you've seen this film, you'll recognise the deep, brassy punctuations that are so characteristic of Inception's sound world. The film, like so many of Nolan's, is deeply concerned with time. The deeper into a dream we are, the slower that real-world time flows. And so this music, which the team used to warn dreamers it's almost time to wake up, becomes this when slowed down, which in Zimmer's hands becomes this.
It's too soon.
At the deepest level, we're left with nothing but the lowest, deepest, slowest brass notes. What really defines the sound world of Interstellar is Zimmer's use of the organ. The organ gives a sense of religiosity, of reaching out towards something infinitely greater and infinitely more vast than our lives on Earth. After all, that is more or less what the greatest cathedral organs were designed for. It's used both for the emotional connection between Cooper and his daughter, reaching out across space, and also for these giant leaps for mankind. Reminding us of the great organ from Richard Strauss's Also sprach Zarathustra, used famously in 2001: A Space Odyssey. And sometimes this sound world overwhelms everything else on screen.
Nice one, Tom.
Here, Nolan takes the retreat of Dunkirk and turns it into a high-octane thriller. Again, we're encountered with time, as 3 different stories occur across different time spans. Nolan actually recorded his own stopwatch, and Hans Zimmer has made this integral to the score, and lets it turn into a rhythmic pulse which appears in high-paced action scenes. Then there are these wailing sirens which constantly appear in high-stress scenes. He's also returned to the idea of infinite tension, but this time through means of a shepherd tone. The concept is that a tone will sound as if it is infinitely rising. As the highest tone rises, it fades out, while at the same time a lower tone will fade in, and this gives the effect of endless rising. Hans actually orchestrates this idea into the music. That is, the orchestra itself reproduces the effect of a shepherd tone as it rises up and up and endlessly up. So put all this together, the fast ticking stopwatch pulse, the wailing sirens, and the shepherd tone. You're left with a recipe for extreme intensity. All of these sonic ideas we've looked at, whether it's the use of the organ, or heavy deep brass, gypsy band, or the human voice, became integral and essential to that soundtrack's character. It's hard to imagine his most famous scores without these sounds, because, as with the best film scores, the sound worlds that Zimmer creates have become a very central component of the world we see on screen. Without Zimmer's sound worlds, the movie would have a totally different feel to it. It wouldn't be anything like the universes that Zimmer and all the other filmmakers have carefully co-created. In some sense with Zimmer's music, these sound worlds are more important than the melodies or harmonies that he writes, and it's this focus on designing a sound world rather than a traditional score that sets apart modern film composing from the last generation. And it's Zimmer's brilliance at creating and bringing to life a sound world which fits so well with its film that sets him apart as one of the best in today's business. I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, I have plans to make more like it, so please do subscribe if you want to see more, and like this, share it, and let me know what you might like to see next. Thanks for watching.